Good morning. Oh. Good morning. Okay, this is really loud, so good morning. Good morning. There you go. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you on this Labor Day morning. I'm the Reverend Dr. Beth Johnson. My pronouns are she, they, and I want to welcome you to this actually very special Labor Day service. Tell you a little more about it in just a moment. But first, I want to welcome you to this place of peace, justice, and hope. In this Unitarian Universalist congregation, we affirm no matter who you are, who you love, or where you are on your journey, you are welcome here. For those of you joining us online, we're so glad you're here. If you're visiting with us today, we invite you to sign our visitor's book. It's right there in the back in the living room. And members and friends, remember to wear your name tags with your pronoun stickers. And if you need a new name tag, you can see someone at the visitors table. Our music today is provided by Jamie Passman, who's back. He's back. For those of you who don't know, Jamie is our music director, and we both kind of took the summer off, and now we're back. Oh, darn. So do I. Listen, we'll just wing it. Yeah. And we do recognize that individuals of all ages and abilities have different needs during the service. In the living room, in the back, we provide a cart of fidgets and drawing supplies. If at any point you feel the need for movement, feel free to get up, grab a fidget, engage in drawing, sit on the couch. There's different kinds of seating. Just do what you need to do to be comfortable. May you each know you are welcome here in this house of peace. May our worship and our fellowship this morning touch your heart, your mind, and your spirit. Now again, I'm really excited about this morning's service. This is a service that's called Labor in the Pulpit, and there are services like this happening all around the Chicago area today. This service is provided by Arise Chicago, which is a beautiful organizing community organization that links faith with workers to do action. So it's really exciting. When I was in San Diego, I was on the board and the president of the Interfaith Center for Worker Justice in San Diego. I was on the board, I was the president, and I experienced many labor in the pulpit services where we have someone from labor come and talk about the work and talk about labor, and this is here in our community. So I'm very excited to welcome our guest speaker from Arise Chicago. Arnoldo Fabea is the Director of Field and Organizing for the Illinois Federation of Teachers. He's led campaigns that have changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of workers in various sectors: healthcare, property services, retail, food processing, public employees. His first major victory was helping 5,000 mostly immigrant janitors in Houston organize a union with SEIU. And in 2012, he helped lead the first strikes of Walmart associates in the US. Yes. Which boosted the efforts of the national Fight for 15 campaign. Now, my brother, I don't know, were you in Richmond for the convention for the Fight for 15? Okay. I was involved with the Fight for 15 since its inception, so I feel that connection to you. It led to increases. You know, the Fight for 15 led to increases in minimum wage across the country. And he lives in the suburbs here with his wife, Maria, and 3 children, Sophia, Xavier, and Seba. So it's good to have you, and we will welcome you up to our pulpit in just a moment. I'd like you to just go ahead and take a breath with me as we acknowledge that we here in the western suburbs inhabit areas that are the traditional territories of indigenous peoples. As people trying to live into a more just world, we have a responsibility to acknowledge the history and the legacy of colonialism, the harm done to Native people, and also to work to repair that harm. I invite you to take another breath with me as we enter into our time of worship. Breathing in, we enter this sanctuary for kindness and comfort. May rough, worn hands and aching backs be healed. Breathe with me. We enter this sanctuary of hope for equality. May those who labor to survive know justice. Taking a breath, we enter this sanctuary of love and vocation. May our bonds of solidarity with workers everywhere be strengthened. Breathe with me. We enter this sanctuary of courage and friendship. May we proceed hand in hand towards freedom. Spirit of life, spirit of love, Holy One moving in, through, and among not only us, but all. Be with us in our time today. With each breath that we take, we remember our kinship with all workers and with all life. And may we vow to build a new way, a way of justice, a way of freedom, and a way of hope for all. May it be so. Amen. So we really are looking now to consider how important it is for us to build a new way among ourselves, a new way in our community, and a new way in our world. So what else could we do, Jeannie, but sing? We invite you to rise in body or spirit as we sing, "We Are Building a New Way."
Our chalice lighting is by Florence Caplow. In recognition of Labor Day, we light this flame to honor all work, including the work of our hands and our backs, in gratitude for all the labors that support our world and for all those who boldly continue the work of justice, equity, and peace. There's always a lot going on in church, and you can read all about it in News and Notes, which arrives in your inbox every Friday, and there are printed copies available. If you would like to receive News and Notes, stop by the welcome desk. It's the desk in the living room. You can't miss it. And we promise we won't spam you. You'll only get News and Notes. This is Labor Day, of course, and in true Labor Day freedom, there's going to be a lot of marches and protests and counter-protests. So if you would like to join one, and we highly encourage it, please see News and Notes, or we have a collection of some up on the televisions. As we enter into this time of service where we share our resources with this church community, I encourage you to think about all the ways in which the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale has been there for you through all your life stages. Whether you have been here for decades or recently joined, or have recently started coming on Sunday, this church is here as your guiding beacon for living out our values and supporting you through all your life's journeys and your call to do justice. Our financial contributions to this congregation allow us to support the work of this church and of this world. Now let there be an offering to sustain and grow life and mission of this congregation, and please join us in our offertory words. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another, with the people around us, and with all the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you all. I want to let you know that there will be an opportunity for you to be generous again a little bit later in the service, as we'll be taking a special collection for Arise Chicago. In the meantime, I invite you to take a breath with me. Again, as I walk from the pulpit to join you Beloved, we come with our joys, with our sorrows, with our lostness, with our longings, with our hopes, with our aspirations. Sometimes all of it, all at once. So we set aside time in the service to simply be and to breathe and to acknowledge all that it is that we bring with us. So breathing in, I invite you to just settle into your seat. Feel your feet on the floor, your back on the chair, your hands and your legs perhaps, or holding the needles that ground you. Bring all of who you are into this space, acknowledging that we come with joys and sorrows, acknowledging that in coming together, we remember that together we are more than we could ever be alone. As you settle in, I invite you to focus on what it is, if you can hear, what it is that you hear around you. The cicadas in the distance, your own breath, your neighbor's breathing, perhaps even the beating of your heart. I invite you to feel what you can feel on your skin, maybe the air from the windows or the fans, your clothing. Reminding us that we're whole people. Bring your attention to the taste that you have in your mouth, maybe your last sip of coffee or water or toothpaste or breakfast. Reminding ourselves that we bring mind, body, and spirit to this place. Breathing in. Now I invite you to take a look around. What is it that you see in this place? Beloved ones, the windows, the cardinal, which is for Jerry Shipton. Breathing in and out. Remembering that when we breathe in oxygen molecules that have been at one time or another in the lungs of every breathing being for billions of years. Breathing in and out. Breathing in, we inspire. Breathing out, breathing in, we aspire. Breathing out and in, we inspire. Breathing together, we conspire. We conspire with the spirit of life, with the spirit of love, with one another, with all who are seeking peace and justice and love. And I know we come with joys and sorrows, so I'm just going to give you an opportunity this morning to go ahead and speak it out loud, and I'll repeat it. And I want to acknowledge that our Darren has injured his foot, and I understand that he has a broken foot, so we're going to send love and prayers for Darren. Are there other joys or sorrows that you have that you'd like to call out? Nancy? Today is Pam Fodor's birthday, our director of programs, and I gave her the day off. We can't sing to her. Let's sing to her next week, okay, and embarrass her. We'll really surprise her. Yes, Nancy. Yes. Thank you for the beautiful weather and for this beautiful earth that we have. Are there other joys or sorrows? Oh. Okay, for Jamie's kitty Lynx. For all who are suffering, for all who are afraid, for our beloveds in Ukraine and all of the places that are in danger, and for our beloveds in Gaza as they experience the genocide that is occurring there. We know that our hearts are big enough to hold it all. There isn't a pain too small or too large that we can't hold together. So we name these truths that we might allow ourselves to live with an open heart. So take another breath with me. We acknowledge that we have an aspiration for love, for kindness, for hope, and for joy. I'm acknowledging the death of Reverend Dr. Larry Ward, a little over a week ago, a dear friend who was also a Buddhist teacher. And so, in honor of the aspirations that we hold, I invite you to sing with me, "May I be filled with loving kindness." As you sing, take in a breath, feel it as a prayer, invite it into your body, invite it into your spirit, invite it into your soul. We're beginning with ourselves, beloveds, because we also have those aspirations for ourselves. Sing. May we hold this song not only as an aspiration, but as an inspiration, and may we conspire together to create a world of loving kindness where all may know peace, where all may be well, and where all may be whole. Thank you, beloveds. Again, I am very excited to invite up Arnoldo Fabela. Am I saying that right? Fabela? Fabela. Okay, let me try that again. Fabela. Who's going to speak to us about labor in the pulpit and his amazing journey. It is so good to see you, friend.
Thank you. Good morning. It's an honor to be here with all of you this morning. My name is Arnoldo Favela, as was told to you all before. I am a union organizer for nearly 25 years now. I work for the Illinois Federation of Teachers, where I am the Director of Field and Mobilizing. The Illinois Federation of Teachers is a union of about 100,000 workers across the state of Illinois, representing educators, para-support professionals, faculty at universities across the state, and state employees as well. Through my career, I've organized tens of thousands of workers, impacted the lives of millions, through work I did at the United Food and Commercial Workers, as well as the Service Employees International Union. I sit on the board of Arise Chicago, which is a very similar organization to the one that Reverend Beth talked about belonging to and leading in San Diego. Since 2002, when Arise Chicago was founded here in Chicago, We've been able to help nearly 50,000 workers secure almost $10 million in wages that have been owed to them, and have helped incubate dozens of unions where we've been able to work with folks who wanted to make some changes in their workplaces, didn't know a path to that, and were able to get good support, good opinions, and good advice from organizers of Arise Chicago and the many unions that are part of this faith labor community organization. Thank you for the honor of being able to speak to all of you today, this morning. You're helping fulfill one of my parents' dreams. I think, they're very, very religious, and I think somewhere in the recesses of their minds, they'd hoped I'd be a fisher of men. I don't think they realized all those years ago that it probably would be in a different way, helping workers organize unions. This weekend, I am one of dozens of speakers for this annual Labor in the Pulpit program. But it's not just labor in the pulpit, it's labor on the bima, it's labor in the minbar. This is a program coordinated through Arise Chicago and the Chicago Federation of Labor, where they're able to connect many of their affiliates, many of their leaders to these opportunities to be able to be in communion with people all of faith all over the area of Chicago. And it's important that we're doing this. We are living in volatile, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous times. And sad to say, but there isn't necessarily a playbook that we can just pull out, take the dust off and say this is how we're going to operate. Because conditions can change, even from the things that we've seen in the past. The advent of technology makes this moment even more dangerous for those that oppose freedom, democracy, liberty. But I think one thing that is always constant, regardless of the times, is the building of community, of people coming together, really leaning into what we see in the labor movement as the power of people, being able to come together. So I'm grateful for the work I do day to day, being able to do that, to bring people together, and even more grateful to be in a space with all of you together, trying to make those connections between everything that I've experienced. I would say that in my life, I've seen this coming together of many of the facets that I'll talk about this morning, the power of faith, the importance of worker struggle, and the value of the immigrant experience in our country, and the value that immigrants bring to all of us and to our communities. One of the things that ties together communities of faith as well as unions and those of us in the labor movement is that we believe a better world is possible. It's really this concept of hope that I heard earlier as you all were talking about the values of your congregation. As the theologian Paul Waddle talks, hope has to be seen to be believed. It has to be made visible. It has to be something we can feel and touch. We are called to be persons who embody hope for one another. We have to be each other's partners in that hope. Religious communities might talk about this as a world where the power of the higher God's love illuminates the holiness of all creation. In the labor movement, we talk about this as a world where workers coming together across lines of race, gender, language, immigration status are able to organize and win a world of dignity and justice. In both religious communities and in the labor movement, we know that sometimes the world we're fighting for seems very far away and not something that we can necessarily gain immediately. For workers, it's often realizing through their day-to-day experiences that they're in very exploitative conditions, often working for owners that are far away, who they've never met, people who are billionaires, running large corporations that are able to make decisions that impact their daily lives, but they have no way of being able to communicate back. This can create those barriers of division that leads workers to being very scared. And in that fear, people can divide amongst themselves because they are scared of the greed, the violence, the isolation that they feel is just insurmountable. Yet even in these conditions, workers persevere all the time. And although not every worker who tries to organize a union may succeed, many, many do. And it's actually that process of even trying to fight for something better that can change many people's lives. I do feel that in my nearly 25 years as a union organizer, that it's almost a chain of campaigns, of workers, of leaders that have tied it all together that bring me to this moment in front of all of you, that have led to me having a lot of vision and wisdom about what this moment may need. I think about workers and leaders like a young man named Ronnie Ortiz, who I met in 2003. He was a Guatemalan immigrant working in Washington, D.C., cleaning office buildings during afternoon hours, and then building some of the skyscrapers in the Virginia side, a lot of the construction that was happening during those years. Ronnie was an incredible leader. He was one of the first that I got to meet and to try to develop. I may have been all of 6 months in the job as a union organizer when I was sent to Washington, D.C. to organize janitors. And Ronnie worked at a very interesting building in Washington, D.C. It was the headquarters of the American Medical Association. And Ronnie and his colleagues made about $7 an hour, worked 4 hours a night, and had no health insurance, even though they worked for an organization like the American Medical Association. And this wasn't a situation where maybe the folks who, made the decisions about janitorial services were looking around and saying, we're just going to do what everyone else does. In the city of Washington, D.C., like Chicago, there was a janitors union, and they had been able to secure living wages and benefits like health insurance for thousands of their members. So this was something where that institution, the American Medical Association, had made a decision to be out of line with everyone else around them. So we went there and we were like, we need to organize folks. But as we know, in any situation, it doesn't matter if somebody from the outside comes in and says, there's an injustice here that needs to be fixed. What's most important, what's most powerful is when it's the workers themselves standing up and saying, I want something better for myself. So here, as an organizer, I went to go talk to the workers. And something happened that it happens very regularly on organizing drives. The workers started identifying for us who was the person that mattered most, that had to be in order for them to be willing to do something. It was the natural leader amongst them. They kept on telling us, you got to talk to Ronnie. You got to get Ronnie on board. If he's not on board, then this is not going to happen. So here I am on a spring march in D.C., knocking doors of some of the workers, and we go to visit Ronnie. It had been raining quite a bit that spring in D.C., so it's a swamp, so everything was flooded. And this was before there was tremendous gentrification that's happened over the last 2 decades in D.C., so this was 20 years ago before that. And we're knocking on the door of an apartment building probably about 2 miles away from the White House. But it could have been on the other side of the world. The living conditions of the folks in this building were pretty terrible. We walk into the lobby of the building, and to my right was the elevator shaft where there was water pouring down from the rain. And then we look at our sheet, our walk list, and sure enough, Ronnie lives in a garden apartment. So we walk down the stairs, there's about an inch of water on the floor. You could tell they were used to this reality because things in their apartment were on cinder blocks. Thankfully, I was there with somebody who was a more senior organizer who was teaching me at the time, because walking in the door of Ronnie's apartment, I thought to myself, there's absolutely no way he's going to want to do something to change his working conditions, to change his life. And we start talking to Ronnie and hearing his story, I became even more ingrained in that belief. Ronnie had just come to the United States maybe about 1.5 years before, because his mother was, she had been diagnosed with cancer and the treatments were too much in Guatemala. So he needed a way to be able to pay for them. He had paid a coyote, someone who brought him over, thousands of dollars that he still owed. So it was the reason why he worked those 4 hours during the afternoon cleaning a building and then would jump on the metro to head out to Virginia to work construction overnight, literally just sleeping a few hours before starting up and doing it all over again. And I thought to myself, if I were in his shoes, there's no way I'd want to do anything to risk what I'm trying to build, risk what I'm trying to do for my family back home. But sure enough, as we talked to him about the injustices around him, the fact that he worked for these big corporations that weren't paying their fair share, and they were making his life difficult, and that his coworkers saw him as a leader, by the end of that conversation, he was in. Within a month, we were on strike in front of his work site, the American Medical Association, with his colleagues fighting for what they believed in. And within a few months, we would win their recognition of a union and them belonging to the union that represented janitors in DC. It's moments like that, I think, for Ronnie, that, even though there was uncertainty where he might have felt stuck, that he kind of saw the possibility for a new and redeemed world, that it revealed itself to him, that there was a way to be able to change things and that he did not need to fear things. I think part of that power and that feeling was that he knew he wasn't alone. he was with his colleagues, with other workers who were willing to stand up with him as well. In the words of the prophet Isaiah, those who trust in spirit, those who trust in possibility, they raise new wings like eagles. They run and do not weary. They march and do not tire. I've seen this in many other instances in my life, and another leader that really impacted me and that showed this power, what I would say is a power of personal change, was a young woman named Tina Campbell. She was a worker, a janitor as well, in Madison, Wisconsin, who I got to meet when I was all of a 24, 25-year-old organizer. Tina was a 19-year-old mother. She was in an abusive relationship with a person that was many years older than her. And this was who I found one night outside of a state of Wisconsin building as I was there trying to talk to the workers that did property services, that cleaned and secured the building. Through the campaign that ended up lasting about 2 years, Tina found something that many countless workers have found before. She found her voice. She found power in belonging to something bigger than herself. And through that power, she ended up leaving that abusive relationship because she knew that she needed to do something better for her son. She ended up getting a grant to be able to continue her education. She ended up finding assistance to get her own apartment to leave a pretty terrible situation that she was in. And by that time, I'd already left that campaign. It was still going. The campaign in the union was fighting to improve salaries and working conditions for the folks that cleaned the buildings for the state of Wisconsin. But probably about 2 years later, while I was in Chicago doing other work, I got a call one evening that her former partner one night had knocked on her door for a new apartment, and as she opened, he shot and he killed her. And for me as a 25-year-old organizer, I was just devastated. I didn't have the emotional capacity to understand what was happening. I kind of shut down. I remember one afternoon as I was driving, several weeks afterwards, just starting to cry, and I had to pull over just to let the emotion come out of me. And still, I didn't know what to do. And thankfully, there was another, veteran organizer who'd been around, who had wisdom, that really kind of drove an effort to build a little fund for Tina's son. We would all contribute. And I went to the event where we kind of launched the fund. And I saw Tina's mother, a woman who I'd met many times as I'd visited Tina at home and talked to her about building the union. And when I sat with Tina's mother and just started crying and apologizing, letting her know how sorry I was, that I felt at fault for what had happened to Tina, for having started this campaign to organize. Her mother put her hand on my shoulder and told me Tina was the happiest she'd ever been in her life those last 2 years, trying to do something, build something, being a part of something. It took the weight off of this 25-year-old organizer of my shoulders. It made me realize that even through the adversity that she had faced, the tragedy of what had happened, she had found her way, she had found her voice, and that could never be taken away. I'd say that part of the reason that I didn't just quit at that moment and leave was because what I'd seen in my own life before, the struggles of my own parents, in many ways how this all comes together through my own experiences, the power of faith, the power of organizing, the power of immigrant communities. My parents are both immigrants from Mexico, but they came in a different time. They came in the 60s, in a different generation, a different era where the process to immigrate was very different. Yes, people, including people in my own family, were deported, but the path back wasn't as difficult as it was now. Yes, people did find ways to get here, but the methods were much easier than they are now. Currently, you often hear people say, folks should report to a point of entry. In today's society, in our environment right now, when individuals show up to a point of entry, the way many of our descendants may have shown up in Ellis Island, they're immediately deported. They're put into proceedings to be deported. My father, that wasn't the reality when he came, and he was or my mother. In fact, my grandfather, he was deported. He lived in Elgin. He worked at a foundry right off the river. But as soon as he got deported, his supervisor, who was a Puerto Rican gentleman, told them, as soon as you get to the other side, submit this paperwork, make sure I'm on it, and we'll get you a visa. And within a couple months, my grandfather was in a Volkswagen coming up with all of my aunts and uncles, in a documented way. So just a very different reality to that's facing immigrants now. My parents also came at a time where in this country there were more unionized workplaces, so they found work at a unionized steelworker plant that made steel cans in the suburbs, in the Elgin area. It was there that they actually met through my mom's brothers who were there longer, and they were introduced, to each other through that connection. So growing up, I always saw, what we had compared to other families. My parents paid no more than $5 or $10 a month for full family health insurance, had guaranteed wages. We had a really nice company picnic that they could bring their families to during the summer. And yet we could see for those members of my family who came only 10, 15, 20 years afterwards, how different their experience in the United States was, the struggles. And part of it was not only the changing laws around immigration and how long they had to wait, but also the changes around work. There was no longer the many countless manufacturing plants that were unionized that people could just show up to. It was a lot more of a struggle. There was a lot more service jobs. And in fact, a lot of my family are still doing service jobs. Many have even retired from those jobs, and it's still a struggle. But what I saw through my parents was their ability to navigate all these spaces and weave them together rather than allowing them to be siloed. So as they were, changing their faith, because we were raised Catholic, my parents became Protestant, in my youth, they were trying to figure out a way of just making sense of everything around them and not keeping these silos distant from each other. Years later, they left a Baptist congregation where we were at and found themselves at a even more conservative, non-denominational church that we attended for many years, nearly a dozen years, until I went to college. And I recently went back to their church, and I saw something really powerful. My parents actually, through my work, my efforts, have kind of been able to keep this sense about them that even though, in their congregations, they're very devout, they are very proud of the fact that they vote as Democrats, that they're proud union members, and they don't hide that from other folks in their congregation. And I can imagine for many years that was difficult. But now it's probably become this kind of, in many ways, a light for some of their colleagues, that some of the other congregants who are confused about the moment. I recall when I was going to church with them all those years ago, several conspiracy theorists in the flock, folks that would talk about, the government's coming to take your guns and it's gonna, they're gonna be watching you. So I was literally at their church just a few weeks ago. I try to go with them every couple of weeks, as a way of just reconnecting with my parents. And I'm, in a similar room to the one in the basement with coffee and donuts, and I hear some of these gentlemen that I remember being conspiracy theorists, and surprisingly, they were saying, as I was eavesdropping, they were talking about the fact that they were even more worried now. And it surprised me, because my parents had talked to me about how their colleagues had felt in 2016 and 2020 and even 2024. But finally, things that they had feared in the 90s, things that they had talked about happening in Waco, Texas, they were now seeing happening in communities all around them. I gave them a little bit of, praise. I was like, I'm glad that you're opening your eyes and seeing what's happening, and let's hope we can still do something about it. And I think it's something for me that's important, is that even when you may disagree with folks, and it happens within unions as well, that you got to keep engaging with another, keep in community with one another, and remind each other of those values and those lessons as they come up. This last year has seen unprecedented attacks on workers' rights and immigrant rights, and it's with a speed and ferocity that I think that very few people imagine. The current presidential administration is attempting to undermine important institutions for workers, like the National Labor Relations Board, the Department of Labor. These are organizations that are intended to protect and secure workers' rights and our ability to come together. They've attacked OSHA, which is endangering millions of workers, affecting them with extreme heat, exposing them to toxic chemicals, and increasing the number of workplace injuries through these changes in policy. They're cutting the wages of federal workers, laying them off en masse, limiting their right to organize, and creating conditions where we're seeing workers walking off the job at many important federal agencies. Places where you don't want to see folks walking off the job, like the CDC, where you want people who are experts in their fields continuing to keep our communities safe. And of course, we're seeing the attacks on immigrant communities, a relentless persecution. And we obviously know how this is making and empowering, emboldening folks that are racists. But this is also impacting employers, many of them feeling they can take advantage of this fear, of this anxiety, to try to foist upon workers terrible working conditions, threaten them with deportation if they complain. This is all part of a programmatic effort to try to undermine institutions that still have the power and the wherewithal to be able to stand up for workers' rights, for people's rights. Unions are some of the largest self-funded organizations in the United States and across the world. In many countries around the world where we've seen the backsliding of democracy over the last 100 years, it's been the power of labor unions that have been able to prevent that, and in many circumstances allow the return to democracy. But when you look at those places where there wasn't a strong labor movement standing up for what was right, it was much more difficult for people, for society to be able to come back to prevent that backsliding. Despite all of that, workers will keep on fighting. In Isaiah's words, they trust in that possibility. They run and they do not weary. They march and do not tire. There's a couple important campaigns that are happening around the Chicago area that I want to be able to talk to you all about today, efforts that are happening about that workers are leading. Because you may at some point in your life, as you're doing something else during the day-to-day, you may have an opportunity to help. You may see a picket line forming and want to honk. You may hear about a protest and say, hey, can I show up and support in some way? Will I be able to provide some kind of comfort, some kind of support that will be important to these workers in that moment? And it's important because Chicago, as probably you've heard this said before, is a union town. In fact, Chicago is the hometown of the labor movement. We joke a lot about how when you look at many unions have numbers next to them, SCIU Local 1, AFT Local 1. Chicago has the most local ones in the United States. And it shouldn't surprise those of us who are students of history, because it was in 1886 in Haymarket Square where all of this began. But was seeded by immigrant workers in Haymarket Square, led to 5 years later a Pope Leo, a different Pope Leo, basically putting forward doctrine that would give workers language and space and agency to be able to fight for a better world. And only 5 years after that, only 10 years after Haymarket, where the Chicago Federation of Labor was created. So it was that moment where workers stood up that led to people in power saying something needs to be done, and then that feeding back to workers being able to create their own agency, their own vehicle for change. So it shouldn't surprise us that there are immigrant workers still fighting and standing up in this moment. One of the biggest things that's happened this past year has been rideshare workers, those individuals who work for Uber and Lyft, being able to stand up and win a neutrality agreement from Uber. Thousands and thousands of folks now use these platforms to make a living. And 10 years ago, the ability to do so was very different. And as more drivers have come onto those platforms, it's become increasingly difficult for people to make a living wage. It's in many ways, really, really awful to think about. You're considered through tax law to be an independent contractor when you're a rideshare driver, but you have no agency. You have no ability to dictate your terms of work. That's dictated by an algorithm on a platform that decides for you who you get to pick up when and how much that ride's going to cost you. And if there's a lot of drivers around you, it's likely going to be less. So it was an incredible thing that over 6 years, these Lyft and Uber workers were organizing, and through work with the Chicago Gig Workers Alliance, with the Machinist Union Local 701, and Service Employees International Local 1, that they were able to raise their voices loud enough that Uber agreed to a neutrality agreement where they will be able, hopefully in the next year, win legislation in Springfield that will give them a right to organize their own union. If it goes through, it'll be the second such process of workers in our country. Currently in Massachusetts, workers were able to secure those rights, and they're in the process of organizing their own union of independent drivers. We could be next, and that's really the hope. There's also other fights happening still in some of those manufacturing spaces like the ones I described from the past. At Mauser Packaging, a manufacturing plant in the suburbs of Chicago as well, workers who are members of Teamsters 705 are facing extreme temperatures in workplaces to the point where their work aprons were melting. Just imagine how hot it's got to be for that to happen. Exposure to toxic chemicals without proper safety equipment, and various other unfair labor practices. And this is all from a company that has a history of intimidating workers, of threatening folks based on their immigration status. Well, once again, this could have been a moment like the one I feared for my dear friend Ronnie Ortiz, where you would think they were too afraid, they would not want to do anything. But these workers did stand up, and they didn't back down. And thanks to the support of allies and folks like Reverend Beth, who was on the picket line with them, they were willing to stand up and did not stand down, and were on strike for over 2 months, fighting for a contract that would guarantee them immigration protections, dignity, and safety in the workplace, and they won. The other thing I think we're all hearing about, and many are nervous about, is when it comes to immigration defense. Yes, we are hearing, as probably the same you all are, of threats of a police force descending on Chicago and surrounding areas over the next couple of weeks. But we have to remember that there's been lots of work happening in communities over these last couple of months to defend against these attacks, to the point where even early on in the first couple of weeks of the Trump administration, there was complaints from the administration about how prepared Chicago was. Border Czar Tom Homan was complaining about how educated and informed workers were of their rights, and how it was making it very difficult for them to be able to do their job, quote unquote. This is likely going to be changing over the next couple of weeks. What they're talking about doing is at a scale of what we saw in California. What I ask all of you is, you all know who are your neighbors who might be feeling threatened, who might be feeling fear. It's important in this moment to let them know that you're with them, that you're standing with them. If you hear about actions and activities, this is the moment to show up, to let folks know who might be fearful that they're not alone. I'll share as well with all of you the story of my own union. I was hired to the IFT from a career organizing private sector workers because in 2015, the union knew it was under threat. At the time, there was legislation making its way, not legislation, sorry, but there was court cases making their way to the Supreme Court that would change the ability for unions in the public sector to be able to keep their membership. Basically, I think folks may have heard of something called right to work, which is usually states on an individual basis can choose if workers have to be in a union or not. The cases that were making their way to the Supreme Court would make it so that any worker across the country in the public sector could have that decision. And that might sound, from 30,000-foot view, like not a bad thing, right? People have a choice. But it's intended to undermine the power of the union. No different to the way we're seeing many policies at the federal level now that are about undermining democracy. When you tell somebody you don't have to be a part of society, you can choose not to belong and do whatever, it makes it even more pervasive that folks will say, well, I'm not going to be in alignment or in community with folks that might be different to me. And that was the power of the union, that we could stay all together regardless of how we felt. But I'm happy to report that even though that was the intention, to try to destroy public sector unions like the Illinois Federation of Teachers, like the Chicago Teachers Union, 10 years later, we're actually stronger than we were back then. And it's because of the power of organizing, of going out and engaging folks. There's the saying, they tried to bury us, they didn't know we were seeds. And in many ways, that's what happened in 2017 and 2018 when the Supreme Court did decide through the decision of the Janus versus ASME court case to take away that ability for public sector unions, to be able to have that continued support and strength. We've organized over 1,000 paraprofessionals and school-related personnel just in the last 3 years. These are folks that in your school communities are doing the work of feeding, of clothing, of taking the temperature of students, of being the teaching assistants in classrooms. These folks are often overlooked, not just in school communities, but in society. We often think about the school and we just think of a teacher, but there are thousands, if not millions, of workers that make schools run, and they're not a certified teacher. And thankfully, through our efforts as a union, we've been able to give power and a voice to over 1,000 of them. This summer alone, we organized 3,800 research assistants at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, who did not have that right under law until just a few years ago. But I will say this, it was the first campaign I was on over the last few months where I met an international worker who told me that they were fearful that the baby they were going to have the following week, if they would be a United States citizen. They were here on a student visa. This was right after the executive order around birthright citizenship that's being challenged in court. And this worker wasn't sure if their child would be a U.S. citizen. All I was able to provide to them in the moment was like, because she also had a concern about being able to breastfeed at work. On that, I was able to tell her that you do have a right, and there's Illinois law that allows you to do that and to have a space. Unfortunately, I can't tell you about what's going to happen with this birthright citizenship case. And that was really scary to be able to process that with someone in this moment. So on this Labor Day, let's take a moment to honor those who came before us, those holy working people from every background who have stood with workers, who have fought, folks who have been on the lines fighting for a 40-hour work week, child labor laws, the minimum wage. Let's honor the workers who right now are struggling for fair pay, for safe workplaces, for protection from immigration enforcement, and dignity for themselves and for their families. And let's organize in our workplaces, in picket lines, in the streets, in our communities, to overcome the fear and win a world that recognizes the infinite sacredness of every working person. As you might have seen on your screen before, this Labor Day is going to be very different to other Labor Days before us. In the 25 years I've been in the labor movement, Labor Day has often been the last nice weekend before the summer's over, with folks enjoying backyard picnics, maybe going to a Labor Day parade. But 100 years ago, workers had a sharper understanding of the power of those Labor Days, and there used to be big marches, big rallies on Labor Day. Sad to say that in some communities now, it's often the Chamber of Commerce that has become the organizer of the Labor Day parade and not unions. But this is all changing. Over the last couple of weeks and months, unions across the country have been understanding that this is our moment to be able to show our strength, our solidarity with one another and with all workers. So this past May Day, there was over 1,000 actions around the country of workers standing up, of marching, of standing on intersections with signs. And something similar is happening for this Labor Day. Here in Chicago, there are some activities happening in the suburbs, but the big action is going to be at Haymarket Square, at that memorial that all those years ago became the impetus for a worldwide movement. Unions and leaders from across the country will be gathering at Haymarket to bring in this Labor Day, to be able to put a sharp focus on what is at stake and what we need to do. So if you have time, please join us. There is multiple events. There's a 10 a.m. gathering in a small march to the bigger gathering at 11 a.m. And then at 11 a.m. at Haymarket, there'll be a speaking program and many other folks starting to express their desires before we all march into downtown and try to show the world and show the rest of Chicago that it is a union town. The other thing I would say, if you are a part of, or if you live in a community where you know there are a significant number of immigrant workers, think about joining a rapid response team. These are organically formed groups across the Chicagoland area that are working with each other, oftentimes in secure spaces like a Signal chat group, meeting together to talk about how they can react and respond when there might be the report of ICE in the community. I'm personally a member of several of these rapid response teams, and the value is that when there's a report, we try to get out there to confirm or deny if it's actually ICE. There is a danger in just reporting every single thing that might look like enforcement as ICE. Sometimes it's undercover police in our communities that are just doing their regular work. And you don't want to cause so much concern amongst folks that they're disrupting their entire days over something that isn't that serious. At the same time, when there is ICE, out there, we want to let communities know about their rights. We're circling back with neighbors, asking questions, trying to provide resources and support to folks that might have been picked up in that day's enforcement. And that's something that can be of much value to those folks in impacted communities. So I'm going to end with this, because sometimes it can be hard when you're in that moment of a fight to keep hope alive, to feel like you can still persevere. And this happens not just at the scale of society, but it also happens on a picket line during a worker meeting. And there's something that I learned through my 25 years that comes from the United Farm Workers movement that is a way of trying to keep that energy going. So during a picket line, when the United Farm Workers, when their members would be out there protesting, sometimes someone would shout out a question, which was, "Can we do this?" And they would shout it in Spanish, "Se puede?" And then everyone else around them would respond, call and repeat, basically. Respond, "Sí se puede," yes we can. So someone would say, "Can we do this?" And then everyone else around them would say, "Yes we can." So I'm going to do my best job on trying to teach you all a little bit of Spanish this morning. So I want you all to repeat this after me. Sí se puede.
Sí se puede.
Sí se puede.
Sí se puede.
So just wait for me to now kind of ask that question. ¿Se puede?
Sí se puede.
¿Se puede?
Sí se puede.
Sí se puede. Sí se puede. Sí se puede. Sí se puede.
Sí se puede.
Siblings, this is exactly the kind of energy we need in this moment to remind each other that another world is possible. Sí se puede. Thank you.
Oh, my brother, my father. You are a preacher. Am I right? Friends, if you have been moved by what Arnaldo had to share, if you are interested in seeing us become involved, or you would like to become involved in Arise Chicago, it's a wonderful organization, I'm going to invite you now to be generous as we take a special offering for Arise. And I think that's a surprise for you, Arnaldo. So we'll just have folks come out for a special collection. And come on up and take this special collection. As that's happening, I'm going to invite us into our chalice extinguishing words. And I think Jamie can play maybe a little intro to what we're going to be doing. But join me in our chalice extinguishing words. Go ahead. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of its truth, the warmth of this community, nor the fire of our commitment. These we carry in our hearts, and we share with all the world. Absolutely. So, I said to Arnaldo, his parents should know that you have fulfilled their aspiration for you to be a preacher, because my brother, you brought it today. And I do hope that people will join me in Haymarket tomorrow at the 10 o'clock march, and then 11 o'clock in Haymarket. So I invite you to join me in that. Also, I just want you to remember, or know, actually, we do have an immigrant justice team here, and two of our folks have also agreed that where possible, I will be letting you know when we need to respond if ICE shows up, which they will in the next little while, that we will show up, whoever is able to do that. Remember, you show up in a number of different ways. You pay for the transportation that's going to get us there. You make sure people have food when they come back. So stay tuned for ways that we can be involved with that. And in a kind of another rapid response. So I'm with a protest song collective called Songs for Liberation. And when Songs for Liberation sang at Mauser the second time I was there, and we sang a Woody Guthrie song that I think y'all might know. So I'm going to invite you to rise in body or spirit, and I'm going to invite you to sing with me. We're going to sing all the verses. I'm going to tell you, precious, you might be surprised. The people of this world are getting organized to bound